Hello everybody. So not too much to say at the start of the video. You'll notice I've got a sheet hanging up behind me. That's something I used when I painted this room. That's because I haven't got all the books in yet, so it would be very echoey without it. Let me know if all the audio sounds good. Shuv Vertica, excited that we are going to be looking at some more, let's say, perhaps challenging atheistic problems. I suppose on the, oh, by the way, also other thing, I ripped this shirt. So like you can see my elbow fully pointing out, even though this lighting it almost, but not really. But yeah, basically I was just like, well, I'm not going to change shirt in the middle of the day. Terry Strange says, sounds good, awesome. Thank you for letting me know. And yeah, by the way, welcome everyone. In fact, you know what, I actually wanted to, sorry, I apologize. I wanted to let everyone know on my other channel. So bear with me while I do that. The other thing that I would ask, just for the people who are there, so this is going to be the first time, because I've been busy the past 2 weekends, this is going to be the first time driving to my old church, even though we live in a new place, and my old church is now half an hour away. I've recently been struggling with anxiety, like it's kind of flared up, and it makes it very difficult for me to drive for sustained periods. I just, in trying to focus for as long as I do, it provokes anxiety, because obviously anxiety, you kind of want to keep your mind like calm and collected, but when you're like actively trying to think, okay, there's that junction coming up or whatever, there's a car there, you need to be aware of that, especially on the motorway, it makes it difficult. So if you could just pray for me in that regard, that would be really appreciated. And pray for me in general, because in 2 weeks time we are going to be flying to America, and of course I'm hoping by then my anxiety will have settled down, because I do not fancy that, but whatever. God be with me. And I suppose the other thing I should say is this is the first ever Saturday live stream, so I just say as twice a week to my. I apologize, wait, if there are any new people here, you're probably already annoyed at me, because we're goodness me, 2 minutes into the video, and I haven't actually jumped in, so I will apologize for that. It's just once we get into it, you'll be fine. It's just the nature of sometimes streaming. You just got to clarify a few things beforehand. If you are here, and welcome. It's just you happen to have caught me at a strange moment in my life. That's all there is to it. Recently moved into a new house, lots going on. So unfortunately, for the people who are here all the time, there are things that warrant clarifying for their sake. So yeah, hey everyone, as promised, I'm now streaming twice a week to my religion channel. Check it out if you've got the time. And then let's see if that brings some people over here. All right, so I should just say something about this this video, Richard Dawkins. So the thing about this is, obviously we're going to respond, we're going to have a gay old time, but I saw a clip from this with, well, Richard Dawkins and Alex O'Connor speaking, and genuinely, Richard Dawkins came across as so stupid. I know people are going to say, "Oh, that's not very good," starting off negative. But once we get to that moment, I will point it out if we get to it. And this is obviously, I mean, the video is an hour long. There's no way we're clearing it in a reasonable amount of time. I think maybe we. The thing is, this could be quite, what's the word? Dense, like quite dense. I almost feel like this could take four parts to get through, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's over an hour long, and we're going to want to respond to every point you make, so we'll see. By the way, thank you everyone for the nice comments. Hello, Zach. Good to have you here. Right, so I think we will jump in, of course, me having said the video is so long. But yeah, like I say, you'll see there's no point me kind of going over why exactly this particular clip. I was like, oh, the thing I'll say about it, the one thing I'll say is even Alex O'Connor was like kind of being like, okay, aren't you being kind of stupid here? Basically, so that's the one thing. And I'll say this, I absolutely do respect Alex O'Connor, and I think Richard Dawkins is one of those people who, he seems like a really kind of big deal, but I feel like he kind of just got lucky, and he's not actually very good at arguing. That is my personal opinion on Dawkins. Right. So yeah, we'll just start. Get going.
The show. Thank you very much. Ayaan Hirsi Ali recently, despite you being perhaps the world's most famous atheist, described you as one of the most Christian people that she knows. Why did she say that?
I adore Ayaan. I'm a great fan of hers. I have talked to her about this. I think.
Can I say I don't see how Dawkins is possibly a Christian? Is this going to be a Jordan Peterson thing? Does he aim as high as he can, no matter what?
The respect in which we differ is that for me, what really matters is the truth claims of Christianity. And for her, what really matters is the morality, the politics, actually. I think
it's interesting to say, what matters to me is the truth, as we're about to get into a video explicitly about is Christianity an evil religion. That's kind of, but then obviously clarified like the politics wasn't. And look, I will say this, it does concern me, with Ayaan Hirsi Ali converting. My issue with that is you actually do a disservice to Christianity when you convert for political reasons. Terry Strange saying, so glad she's been saved. Yes, modular the fact that I'm not completely the only problem is sometimes you do worry when someone has a particular motivation for it. You can be a bit concerned. And I don't know if I've seen, look, this is not me. I'm not someone who's out here ever trying to be a negative Nancy. But obviously, you have to wonder what the substance of someone's theology is, and do they actually understand the gospel? Because of course, if you don't understand the gospel, then you can't really profess it.
Christianity
and for example, saying Richard Dawkins is the most Christian person she knows. I mean, what is if your, let's say, hypothesis was that Ayaan Hirsi Ali only cares about Christianity insofar as politically it has utility for opposing Islam. Well, I guess Richard Dawkins has a lot of political utility in terms of opposing Islam. He's criticized Islam. So obviously if you're saved, you would say, well, what makes someone a Christian? Putting their faith wholly in Jesus Christ for their salvation. By that standard, is Richard Dawkins the most Christian person anyone knows? Absolutely not. So that's just one of those things where if someone says that, you're like, oh, I don't know.
A bastion against something worse. As Hilaire Belloc said, always keep a hold of nurse for fear of finding something worse. And for her, I think she wants a faith which will help people to stand up against worse faiths. She singles out Islam, she singles out China, I think, and Putin and wokeism.
Yes.
And I'm with her on all those. And to the extent that I think that a religion might be valuable for political reasons, I would go along with her. But I think it's the wrong way to approach religion. I think that what really matters about a religion is whether it's true. And to adopt a religion for, it's almost as though one is saying, well, I don't believe this nonsense, but it's a very good idea if other people do. And there's something patronizing about that. She doesn't do that. She says, I believe in it. I am a Christian. And therefore, it's not patronizing. But I think the fundamental motivation is a political and a moral one.
I presume.
Yeah, I think I already said. Yeah, I do agree. It has to be about you actually think it's true. But I think there's also kind of an issue with that, which is there are people out there who are not overly intellectual, and as such, I don't think we can preclude the possibility that people might see. For me, I would say political is a bit more cynical. Emotional, I think, is definitely valid. There are people who become Christian for emotional reasons, and yet actually they still end up authentically, sincerely believing, because it's not this thing where you have to be this massive intellectual person who's able to reason yourself logically into being a Christian, even though I would say I'm an example of such a person, but that's, I'm a weirdo.
Both an atheist and as a person with an understanding of not just biological, but also mimetic evolution, having coined the term meme, you'll have to think of religion as essentially something which serves some kind of social function. That must be why it exists. It's why it evolved. Given that that's the case, is it really so inappropriate to think about religion in terms of how it's...
by the way, I'm going to be just doing something in the background. Let me know if you like notice anything distracting. It's not anything like so difficult to stop me doing something. It's actually to do with, of course, if you're aware, and I hope you are, I do daily YouTube shorts just going through my Bible reading. I screwed up, actually. Sorry, I'll just say this now. I screwed up, and I'm really annoyed because essentially I just went onto autopilot. I finished Mark, and I literally actively thought to myself, no doubt compelled by the Spirit, it's kind of annoying or weird and counterintuitive that the Bible goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, when Luke also wrote the book of Acts. So you would just think logically it would make sense to go from Luke to Acts. And also people say John is the best gospel for new believers to believe, or to read rather. So it's a bit weird to sit at the back. It's very weird, that order, isn't it? But nonetheless, and I'm doing by the way, the Bible Project, which again, I assume maybe you guys know, they're a YouTube channel. The Bible Project's Bible in a Year reading list. That's what I've been doing this year. And it's been going great. I mean, here I am in the Gospels, having made it through the entire Old Testament. And I imagine maybe a lot of Richard Dawkins' criticisms are going to be Old Testament centric. So while, of course, the Old Testament's a large book, you have to read it many, many times to have a prepared response to every single possible objection. I can at least say that I have read every single part of the Old Testament. Although, of course, I'd read every part of the Old Testament prior to this year. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off a bit of a ramble. The point is, I've been doing the Bible Project reading plan. That's what I've been using as I've been, essentially saying, oh, this is the portion of the Bible that I'm going to be making a short out of for this this day. And turns out that, because you'll notice that yesterday's one was on Luke. And spoiler alert, I mean, you can probably see where this is going. Turns out that actually the Bible Project had redressed my issue. They had made it, because sometimes they switch around the order, they had made it so you go straight from Mark to John, and therefore I should have been talking about John. But because I'm an idiot, I was just on autopilot, and I was like, I'll just stick with the order that the Bible's in. So I went straight on to Luke. It really doesn't matter. What a waste of everyone's time. I apologize. that was not worth it as a tangent, but there you go. Just know that that I'm stupid.
Serves us socially. If that, from our shared worldview, must be what religion really is.
From an academic point of view, I think it's a very interesting question what religion is all about. What does it serve a social function? Does it even have an evolutionary benefit? And that interests me as an academic. To me, though, it's a huge step to go from even saying it's a good thing, even saying that I wish there were more Christianity in the world, even to say that is nothing to do with believing its truth claims. I mean, truth claims like there is a divine creator who made the universe and made the laws of physics. There's a divine who made the world, who listens to our prayers, who forgives our sins, who sent Jesus to be born of a virgin and then had him crucified. I mean, those are all truth claims.
Of course, none of that matters as long as it helps us fight Putin. As far as
that's the difference between me and Ayaan. I suspect that she doesn't really believe any of that.
And presumably,
I must admit that I'm a bit confused about how Christianity helps us oppose Putin, unless, of course, you were to do my variant of Christianity, which would say that Eastern Orthodoxy is a heresy, and therefore maybe you could oppose it based on that. But even then, of course, I don't really understand. It's a bit weird to pick up Putin, because, of course, it makes sense how Christianity could oppose Islam, but I'm not sure how Christianity in particular opposes Putin.
Many Christians, and I've seen many Christians reacting to this story of Ayaan's conversion, issuing a similar skepticism as many atheists have been, saying, we care about Christianity as a set of saying something real about the world. If somebody can become a Christian just by preferring it as a more comfortable worldview, what does that say about Christianity? I mean, I said a moment ago that, for us, religion just is.
This is also the issue with someone like Jordan Peterson, and why a lot of atheists have an issue there. I'm almost getting an indication at let me check my internet speed. It should be fantastic. Oh, it is. Okay. It says that it's, let's see. So this is the download. Let me see what's happening with the upload speed. because this is, I'm getting a thing just saying that the internet's not great. Like what I'm getting here is fantastic. No, yeah, this is fantastic. So I don't think there is an issue. Just want to make sure there wasn't.
A social tool, essentially. And I think that the ability to adopt Christianity just because of its social function is evidence in favor of our case, that that's all religion is.
Yeah, I think we agree about that. I think where we perhaps don't agree, no, I wouldn't say we disagree. I would say that our fundamental motivation is a bit different, because I think that for you, well, if I ask you what you think the worst thing about Christianity is, I suspect you say something moral, something about the problem of evil, something about the horrific ideas of Paul and the early Christian fathers, that we're all born in sin, and we needed the death of Jesus to save us. That's the kind.
Hold on, that's a bit weird, because I would think, isn't that? I thought that was Richard Dawkins' objection, but he's saying that's what he'd think that Alex would say, but that's not what he'd say. Curious.
Kind of thing that I suspect drives your atheism, whereas for me, that's irrelevant. I mean, for me,
this is the most dissonance between the title of a video and its introduction I've ever seen. Not quite, obviously. I mean, we don't know what insane clickbait, but the fact that like the whole title is Christianity is an evil religion, and then you have Richard Dawkins saying, "Well, I would imagine." Yeah, I actually quite like it. I find his voice quite comforting. He's got that sort of old man voice that, you know, is quite nice. But yeah, I imagine that you would have a lot of these objections that are very morally grounded, whereas that doesn't matter to me at all. It's like, okay, so is he going to talk about Christianity being evil? This is interesting.
About it, but for me, what really drives it is the scientific question: is there a creator underneath the universe? Because if there is, then it's a profoundly different kind of universe from a scientific point of view.
What? Why? You're going to have to elaborate. I don't see why on earth having a creator would change the nature of the universe scientifically. Because if anything, I mean, I'll point out three things right out of the gate. One, there being a creator of the universe is consistent with scientific principles, because the principle of science is that we look at the natural material world and we look at things that happen in the natural material world and we say those things had a cause. So logically, we would have to say that the coming into existence of the natural material world had a cause, because that was a thing that happened to the natural material world. That was a natural material thing, that thing coming into existence. So we'd have to say it has a cause. Logically, since, you know, you'd just be pushing the issue back if you posited a different natural material cause for the, you know, the existence of the natural material world itself. That doesn't make any sense. You know, you're just stuck in a never-ending recess. So you would have to say the thing that produced the natural material world is itself supernatural and immaterial. So that's point one. Just based on scientific principles of how we, you know, do science, which is we look at the natural world and we say something caused this, you would say the world exists, God exists, or at least something supernatural created the universe. Two, of course, is the standard presuppositional point that when we do science, we are assuming that the universe is knowable, that we can know it, and that we should want to know it. Those are all presuppositions that make more sense if you are a Christian or some sort of theist than they do if you're an atheist. Because, of course, if you're an atheist, you have not really any reason to take any of that for granted. You don't have any reason to think that there is some inherent knowable nature to the universe, because the universe is just atoms smashing into each other at the highest level. You don't have any reason to think that we in particular should be able to know the universe, because of course you would think that our brains are purely a product of what gives us the greatest chance of survival. And of course you don't think there is any normative expectations beyond our own. You know, if someone says that they think that it doesn't matter, like anything to do with science, then there's nothing you can say obligates them to care about truth or anything like that. So that's the standard presuppositional thing. And then the third thing I would just say is Richard Dawkins himself is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Patient zero for evidencing the fundamental epistemological issue of atheism, which is that Richard Dawkins has been asked, what would convince you that God exists? What would convince you that atheism is wrong? And he essentially ended up saying, well, nothing really, because, and this is the basic epistemological issue with atheist naturalist materialism, is that what they will essentially say is that their standard for being proved wrong is if there was something that could not possibly be explained by the natural and the material, then they would change their mind. But as they'll readily admit, there is nothing that couldn't be explained by the natural and material, because you can always appeal to mass delusion, psychosis, even aliens playing a prank on us. That is a natural thing. So Richard Dawkins could literally meet somebody who looks like Jesus Christ, whether we're talking the the white European version or what he perhaps more actually looked like. Your audio is breaking up often. That's curious. Someone else said, wait, actually, did someone else say my audio was good? No. Yeah, curious, because my internet speed is good, so I wish I had a reason why that would be the case. And yes, I mean, thanks for letting me know, Esther Pinto. I just wish that there was an obvious solution, because if it's saying that the Wi-Fi is good, and sorry, not even Wi-Fi, by the way, I'm tethered in with an Ethernet connection. Yeah, I just bear with it and let me know if in 5 minutes it's still an issue, because there is something I could maybe do to. Well, the only thing I could do is improve the connectivity, which I don't think it should be a connectivity issue, because I'm getting some. I mean, if this means anything to anyone, I'm getting almost 100 megabytes per second. Anyway, sorry, I was distracted, but I'll just say, if Richard Dawkins was, met Jesus, or someone who appeared to be Jesus, and was literally taken on a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure style time travel tour of every single biblical event, shown it happen in real time, and you asked him, has that convinced you God exists? By his standard, his self-admitted standard, he would then say, well, no, because it is possible in the natural world that aliens exist, and they would have access to, hallucinogenics and stuff that could, delude people. And maybe those aliens have a sense of humor where they think it would be funny to get a committed avowed atheist to become a Christian. So based on my standard, I have to think that that was not compelling evidence for Christianity. That's, of course, the problem. Because if you have an epistemology in your atheistic naturalism that says that as long as anything can still possibly be explained under atheistic naturalism, you will continue to believe it, you're essentially admitting that your position is unfalsifiable, and that you will, via confirmation bias. And this is, of course, the question every atheist then has to ask themselves, because the atheist argument is essentially, well, unless you find something that absolutely necessitates it must have been God, I'm going to continue to believe that God does not exist. Well, that's not an honest epistemological standpoint, and then you have to ask yourself, where are you actually going to draw the line? You ever wonder why Christianity's got the brunt of this and not Islam, when it's categorically worse than Christianity in every aspect? I think part of it is just proximity, right? I mean, it's also worth noting that criticism of Christianity is not a new phenomenon. Christianity has been criticized since the 19th century. Even I think the 18th century in Europe, there were academics who were taking it for granted that the Bible was false. And of course, you had the many examples of people being shocked to discover that, oh wait, the Hittites are real. People that this is the obvious one. People used to think the Hittites were completely made up because they're referenced in the Bible, but that's an old ancient storybook. That's not a credible source of history. And yeah, many examples of sort of around the 1000 BC and towards 500 BC, in that kind of gap, was a lot of stuff that is very well documented in the Bible, but not really documented anywhere else. And the standard opinion for archaeologists at that time period, you're talking Napoleon obviously was doing a lot of his archaeology in Egypt when he went over and invaded there. People were moving around. That was when kind of archaeology really kicked into gear over 200 years ago. And the standard assumption people were making as they went out to dig in these places was, let's be real here, we're not actually going to find anything that backs up Christianity. And in fact, they found out Christianity was pretty valid.
If there isn't, to me, that's the big question. The problem of evil, to me, shouldn't be a real problem, because you just say, well, there could be an evil God. That's a lesser question for me.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing about that is, like, that's not saying there could just be an evil God is not much of a reassurance. So it's maybe not something, while it might be intellectually satisfying, if you actually consider that. And by the way, like, that's something I said before. Like, I don't think it's particularly likely that Judaism or Islam or Catholicism or any other like non-Christian religion is likely to be true. I think all of those religions have massive intellectual issues that make them very difficult to take seriously. But to me, honestly, my biggest concern is that the next option down from Christianity would be some heretofore unconsidered conception of God, which could include a God who literally just, like, it's kind of the Lovecraftian thing, this idea that the cosmic horror of there just being capricious gods who, I mean, like I say, Richard Dawkins could say that aliens might trick us. It is possible that there is an evil God who has tricked us into believing he's loving and kind. And, obviously, as Christians, what we should say is, well, we have absolute faith in God, but of course, being intellectually and philosophically honest, we have to admit we can't know that for certain. But yeah, to say that the idea of an evil God existing is just not an issue, that's a pretty big issue.
I think I actually do broadly agree with you. And that when I explain why I don't believe in God, I do make reference to things like the problem of evil. But it's difficult for me to frame those as moralistic objections. It's more that when considering a particular worldview like Christianity, I think, what would I expect the world to look like? And especially considering how suffering is built into the evolutionary system.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the problem of evil isn't really a moralistic objection. It's a intellectual, factual objection based on the assumption that if God exists, if a good God exists, there cannot be evil in the world.
It makes it very difficult for me to believe that this is being supervised. But like you say, this could just be an evil God. I'm really interested in your characterization of the existence of God and the beginning of the universe as a scientific question. And I wanted to probe this a little bit.
Yes, please.
I had a thought that was inspired by something that C.S. Lewis had said on the relationship between science and religion. And I have this image in my head of people who are really optimistic about the progress of science and the scientific method. And they say something like, look, years ago we used to say so much was down to God. We used to not know why the planets orbited the sun, and we said it was because angels was pushing them. We used to not know why there was so much complexity in biological life, and we said that God did it. But look how we're discovering these laws. We're discovering the law of natural.
Esther Benito, I would be interested. I'm kind of just hoping that this might be an issue on your end. If it's not, like, it would be a real reassurance if it just turns out that it's your. I mean, obviously, if your Wi-Fi is bad, that sucks for you. But it would make me very happy, because if my Wi-Fi is bad, then I have no idea why.
Selection. We're discovering the laws of gravity, and there seems to be this trajectory such that when we say, well, where did it all come from in the first place? One day we'll get there. Now, I don't know if you agree with that.
What an annoyance! Oh yeah, it's not. You're cutting out for me as well. I wonder why. Let me have a listen to it. Let me actually go back and listen to myself. Oh, I got you. It's kind of just like chickadee, chickadee, chickadee. Ah, that's. I wonder why. That. I don't know if you can hear me listening to myself there. That was probably just cutting on top of cutting. Yeah, I'm hearing what it is, and it's not. I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna ask my friend ChatGPT. I'm streaming on StreamYard, and the audio on YouTube is sort of rapidly stuttering but an internet speed test. It says I have an internet speed of 100 megabytes per second, which let's see, what does it say? Okay, no. Oh, I see. Okay, you know what it could be? I think it could just be that my computer is a bit slow because I've got too many tabs open. This might be it. Let me see if this fixes some of the issue. I mean, it would take a while to recover, but let's see. How's it chugging along? Oh, Windows Explorer is using up a lot of memory. That's surprising. Well, I'll close that. Yeah, honestly, like this computer, it sucks. I haven't had it that long, but it seems to be kind of on its last legs. But yeah, it maybe. Well, actually, let me having just shut down ChatGPT. Let me just see the other things it said. Just like, yeah, it could be that because this computer is really struggling with basic things recently in a way that's. I mean, right now, for example, it's very hot. Like I'm just like putting my finger to it. I'm like, that is a hot computer. So that suggests that it is struggling with something. So that seems very likely. I'm quite inclined to believe that's the issue. So still a little jumpy, but a big improvement. Okay, the fact that it's okay. So it's a slow computer issue, which I don't like that. I'll have to get a new computer. Yeah, like this computer, it's really. I've had it since. Wait, I think I've had it since the winter of 2021. So it's almost made it 5 years, hasn't it? Oh wait, no, is that true? No, winter of 2022. So it's got to make it a little bit further. But I think I've never heard this before on your streams. Well, it's possible that whatever. Okay. Should need a new computer to upgrade. Okay, yes. All right. Anyway, we should get back into the video, but yeah, hopefully. I didn't realize we only made it through 6 minutes. Goodness me. Okay. Yeah, we'll get back into it, and hopefully things are fixed, at least better.
As an optimistic trajectory for the scientific method.
Clearly, there's a trajectory, and I would put it that the big problem of design, as William Paley put it, was life. He said something like the physical world is not the best place in which to demonstrate the existence of the creator because it's too simple. And I think he was right.
Wait, hold on a minute. I didn't get that. The big problem with design is life. And he says that life is too simple? I'm not, wait, okay, let me see if he elaborates on that.
Also right when he said that the really big problem for religion is life, and yes. His whole book is based upon looking at design in the living world. Darwin solved that. So Darwin solved the big one, and we have some remaining problems. The arc hasn't really reached its end. We still have some problems with the origin of the laws of physics, the origin of the universe.
Okay, hold on a minute. So he phrased that. Oh, I see. So I think he phrased that very strangely. I think what he meant is the big problem that religion solves is the origin of life. And that is a problem that's been solved by science, by Darwin, which is a bit of a strange thing to have said because, of course, any worthwhile communicator of biology would make a point of stressing that evolution doesn't explain the origin of life. It explains the diversity of life from a single common more basic ancestor. So yeah, not quite making sense there.
But I think that the fact that Darwin solved the big one should give us confidence. That was the really difficult one, the amazing apparent design in the living world. mean, that is such an
he just said it hasn't solved origin. No, I think he said it hasn't solved the origin of logic, but he did say that. I mean, I don't want to go back because I'm quite sure I'm right, but he said it hasn't solved the origin of logic and the like laws of the universe and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure, said that Darwin solved the. You know, actually, I'm going to go back. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
We still have some problems with his life, and
Yes.
his whole book is based upon looking at design in the living world. Darwin solved that. So Darwin solved the big one, and we have some.
Oh, thank you. So, okay, to be fair, he didn't say. So he didn't say. He just said life in general. So I guess if you're granting that he's not talking about the origin of life itself, but then you could say, well, it hasn't really solved the life problem, then, has it? Whatever.
The remaining problems, the arc hasn't really reached its end. We still have some problems with the origin of the laws of physics, the origin of the universe. I think,
for the record, he did not say that it hasn't solved the origin of life. So there's certainly some ambiguity there.
The fact that Darwin solved the big one should give us confidence. That was the really difficult one. The amazing apparent design in the living world. I mean, that is such a staggeringly overwhelming impression of design. There's no question about that. And that was the one that Darwin solved.
Well, Darwin solves the problem of complexity within living organisms, but I think it might be a step too far to say he solved the problem of life.
I see. Alex, Connor, and I just agreeing always. You know, we're like two peas in a pod. I say one thing, he says the same thing. You know, basically, he is just me. I mean, he's younger than me. He will become a Christian when he matures to my level. That's just how it is.
Because, of course, one of the questions that we have to throw into that bundle of things yet to explain, the origin of physics,
yes,
the origin of life.
Well, that's not part of Darwinism, of course.
Right.
That's a separate question, and Darwin acknowledged that. And that is an unsolved problem. It may never be solved in the sense that we may never actually know what the answer is. I think the best we can probably hope for is a model which is so elegant that we may say, well, that's so elegant, it's got to be true. I mean, but that's a bit different from having direct evidence. At present,
this whole thing is premised on the entire argument for theism being God of the gaps, which of course is not the case at all. There are in fact, it's very rare. I genuinely don't know of any serious theist I've heard who's made an argument to the effect of God is true because there's things that the natural science hasn't explained, and therefore we're just going to say that God is the explanation for that. In fact, if anything, if you look at something like the cosmological argument, that's the exact opposite. It's saying that the scientific world the scientific study has allowed us to understand the material world, and that's why we understand that a supernatural creator is what makes the most sense. That's appealing to science and what we know from science. And of course, I mean, similar things people talking about how the Big Bang demonstrates an apparent coming into existence of the universe, which is again in contrast to the kind of non-Christian and historically atheistic idea, which was typically that the universe had always existed.
Really have that. We have various possible ideas, some of them more plausible than others. And I think we know the kind of...
Sorry, hold on a minute. Okay, so let's see. Literally, there are entire theistic channels dedicated to that. Theism gives an answer, so it's better. It's a very, very common philosophical argument. I'm not aware of that, but of course, it's worth noting. When you say theism gives an answer, so it's better, do you not mean perhaps theism gives an answer and it's better? Because I'm not suggesting that there aren't channels that have argued, here is an issue, here is the atheist explanation, here is the theist explanation. The theist explanation makes more sense. That's not a God of the gaps argument, though, of course.
Question we're trying to answer, how did the first self-replicating entity come into existence? And that's a big question. It only had to happen once. Unlike the rest of evolution, where it happened over and over and over again.
I will say, for the record, I am perfectly willing to accept that there might be a naturalistic origin. In fact, I think there is a naturalistic scientific explanation for the origin of life. That is my position. Because I don't advocate for God of the gaps. I would just take it for granted that probably, just as we know where like earthquakes come from, and like we know where things came from based on science, I imagine based on science we could ascertain where life came from, but for the fact that epistemologically we aren't able to observe it.
And over again, all over the world, different continents, different species, different kinds of animal and plant, and so on. The origin of life could be a very, very improbable event because it only had to happen once. And therefore, we are potentially allowed to postulate something very unlikely, something very implausible. I find that quite an interesting point, actually.
Yes.
That I mean, if you take it to an extreme, so suppose we are the only planet in the universe which has life, we can't rule that out. I think it's highly unlikely, but we can't rule it out. If that's true, then that means that the origin of life on this planet was a stupendously improbable event. And therefore, when chemists try to postulate a possible scenario for the origin of life, they're not looking for a plausible argument, looking for a very implausible argument.
That's fascinating, yeah.
Now, I don't believe that, because I think that probably it was not that improbable an event. And therefore,
one reason to think that it's not that improbable is that, as far as we know, life actually emerged very quickly. I mean, what exactly is like the timeline according to standard science? It's like 4 billion years ago, the Earth came into existence. I think life is typically placed as 3.5 billion years ago. Now, I don't want to, commit the sin of temporal relativism. Obviously, I realize 500 million years is a long time. But then you think, like, how much of that time must have been when the Earth was just a giant ball of burning hot mass and stuff like that. And then you realize, actually, the amount of time between when Earth just started to settle down, when we first got the very beginnings of life, wasn't that big of a gap compared to how long it's been since then. It's not as if life was trying to form for billions of years and then it suddenly appeared at the last moment. Instead, it's sorry, I read a comment, but yeah, basically, yeah, it actually suggests that life came along pretty quickly. And of course, that gets to the fact that if there's something improbable about life on Earth, it's the fact that Earth is able to accommodate life in the first place. And it's very strange to me. I think I've mentioned this before. There's this YouTube channel that kind of has a universe simulator, or a simulator for the solar system particularly. And I guess it's based on accurate physics. But essentially what you discover is almost any slight thing about the Earth being changed just kills everyone. And the importance of the moon, this is the thing I find very interesting. The significance of the moon in terms of regulating things like tides and stuff like that seems incredible. Of course, the moon is miraculous because it is so big relative to the size of our planet that really it should have, like, there's no way it could have got caught in the Earth's orbit. It would have just come in, and either it would have been going so slowly that it would just crash into Earth, or so fast that it would zoom right by. There's not really a speed at which an object of that mass could have been traveling that it would have got pulled into our orbit. And of course, that's why what they say is that the moon was created by a massive object smashing into Earth, and that's sending debris out, and that debris then collected into a satellite that was already naturally orbiting. So essentially, and that's not typically how moons are formed. Obviously, the reason why every other planet that we're aware of pretty much has moons that are very small relative to the size of the planet is because those moons had to be able to get caught in the orbit. So that's just, and that's, the moon is very important. And yet, like, what are the odds of that having happened? What are the odds of that having happened to have happened to the planet that was in this particular Goldilocks zone? where water, liquid water could exist.
And therefore, the likelihood is that there's lots of life all over the universe. But even to say a million different life forms all over the universe, since the number of possible places where there could be life is so large.
Yes.
A million is actually a very small number.
That's fascinating. I mean, there are many things in the universe that have a tiny chance of happening, but could. Like, I've heard physicists say that because atoms are just vibrating and they're all sort of vibrating against each other, and hence we get stillness. There's a very small, unimaginably small possibility, but a real one, that this glass could just sort of spontaneously move across the table if all of the atoms, happen to vibrate in that direction. Now, the universe, like you say, I mean, everybody talks about the universe being vast. I read, I think this morning, that if the sun were the size of a white blood cell, then the Milky Way would be the size of the continental United States.
Now, it's terrifying.
We might need to fact check that exact example, but it's and that's just the Milky Way. And when you consider that, are you saying that, in a material...
The other issue here, of course, is the Fermi paradox. So for those who don't know, Fermi paradox, pretty simple. Basically, if the existence of life was something that was just down to chance, we would expect that in such a vast universe, there would be other planets that have had life develop. And we would expect, just statistically speaking, that one of those planets would be more advanced than us. But we also can observe that intelligent life on Earth has developed incredibly quickly. And, obviously we're already thinking about heading into space. And the question is, why is it that there hasn't been some other civilization that has been able to travel to see us? And the answer would seem to be because, and obviously Shu Vertica says, wait, do you believe the entire universe is empty? Yes, I do believe that there is not a single alien planet. There is no other there might be like microorganisms and stuff on some other planets, but I don't think there is a single in the entire universe intelligent civilization. And I think that if human beings continue existing, which is to say, we don't get the end times or anything like that, we will colonize other star systems, because 200 years ago, flight itself was considered impossible. 100 years ago, I imagine people probably thought us going to the moon was impossible. People now think that traveling to another star system is impossible. In reality, we will work it out. It probably, the warp idea of just expanding and collapsing matter in order to, or I think wormholes, and basically bending three-dimensional space through a fourth dimension. That's probably how we will travel, but we will work it out. And not if it's left up to Elon Musk. Oh, we're getting political. Anyway, we'll work it out. And that is the problem, because then you have to ask, well, why is it that no other civilization has worked this out such that we have any evidence at all? And we've sent, radio waves into space, just communicating sequences of prime numbers and stuff. And, those will be traveling. I mean, I guess radio waves, they travel at the speed of light. I mean, they're electromagnetic, right? So I would assume they travel at about the speed of light. They should be hitting people. But yeah, it just seems like the emptiness of the universe is staggering. And that's the problem with saying it's down to chance. Well, if it's down to chance, you'd think that it would also succeed somewhere else. Otherwise, you're saying that it's down to chance, but we have the exact perfect number of, planets and whatever that allows for a civilization to develop, but not so many that lots of civilizations have developed and compete with each other. And that would seem almost more unlikely than anything else you could be suggesting.
In a realistic universe, life can just sort of pop into existence. Well, I understand the suspicion that might be something unimaginably unlikely, but we're in an unimaginable universe. Yes. So that's a wonderful way of thinking.
I wouldn't want to resort to that.
Right,
I think
yeah.
we don't need to. By the way, the possibility of the glass moving across the table, it's there. But I once asked a physicist what the probability is, and he said if you started writing zeros at the origin of the universe, you'd still be writing zeros at this.
Right.
So we probably don't have to go that far.
Yes.
In our, we can have a sort of spectrum of improbabilities.
And I can already see, a theist cutting this up and saying atheists admit that their worldview
so we don't want
is
to
unimaginably unlikely.
We don't want to go there. I mean, my gut feelings. Carl Sagan said, "Right, try not to think with my gut, but if I'm forced, my gut feeling would be that there is lots of life around the universe, but still it could be so rare that we don't have much chance of ever meeting any of these other life forms."
That's fascinating. But let's push
again. So the problem, just to clarify, the problem with this argument is that you've got to bear in mind that this is an example where the scale of the universe in terms of time works against these guys, because they're saying, well, there probably is life somewhere else in the universe, presumably meaning like intelligent life. Because again, if we are just talking about mindless, like single cell bacteria and stuff on Europa or whatever, yeah, probably, but who cares? So presumably he's talking about like intelligent civilizations. The issue with that is if you're saying that you think, that there is life, and you're kind of using that in broad terms, it would seem, I mean, like obviously you would either then have to be positing that all of these like advanced civilizations elsewhere in the universe all happen to have developed pretty much at the exact same time as us, which would seem like that is just insane. Like no one could possibly take that seriously, because you think of all the variables in terms of at what exact time human civilization developed. That doesn't make any sense. So that's ridiculous. But then you'd have to be acknowledging that most of them appeared before us. And before us, when you're recognizing the scale of the universe, that doesn't mean, a few thousand years, maybe they're kind of like living like it's Futurama, the year 3000 or whatever. No, that means millions, if not billions of years, because anything less than that is a rounding error. So then you have to ask the question, all right, the universe is huge, but if there is even one advanced intelligent civilization in the galaxy, maybe even the universe, that has existed for a billion years, there would be some evidence of them. They would have traveled around. It's just like, I genuinely think, I mean, they could pretty much hit up every single planet. They would certainly be aware of Earth, because again, it's billions of years. And like I say, it's one of those situations where they're saying, well, the ginormosity of the universe physically is why we believe these civilizations could have existed. But then the expansiveness of the universe in terms of time and how long the universe has existed is why that doesn't make any sense. Because if you're going to say that these civilizations exist, you would just have to necessarily believe that some of them have existed for millions, if not billions of years. And at that point, you're talking about a rate of advancement relative to us that is insane. And there's just no way that there wouldn't be any evidence of these insanely advanced civilizations. Like, even if they are a million light years away, well, an advanced civilization has been around for billions of years, would have worked out a way to deal with that gap in seconds. Again, because scientists are already on Earth, like theorizing about it. You look at what they're doing, like the Large Hadron Collider and stuff. We're already like working out how to tinker with the universe at an atomic level. So yeah, it's just, I think, ridiculous to suggest that a sufficiently advanced civilization wouldn't be able to pretty much colonize the entire universe.
So the question even further back still, because I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about the origin of the laws of physics, for example.
Yes.
Now, the story that we tell is something like we discover all of these laws, and so this gives us an idea that science is moving in a direction.
So this is an interesting comment. The scale of time works against theism by a lot. 100 millions of years of dinosaurs. So this is what I basically said. If there is a God who is vast and infinite and outside of space and time, for whom space and time is nothing. It is a trivial thing. A God who has cause to want to basically commune with us and have us, let's be real here, worship him, then it would make sense that he would create a universe that is vast in terms of space and time, because it shows his massive power, and it shows to him, or from him, how massive, or sorry, how insignificant space and time is relative to his power, but then also to create us as this tiny little insignificant planet in the midst of it, so that we can see just how unlikely we are. There are, I think, many theistic explanations for why you would have obviously a huge universe physically, but also a huge universe in terms of time, because to God, time would be nothing. Obviously, it only makes sense to suggest that he wouldn't want to wait around to create humans if you're assuming he was waiting around.
And that eventually we may well discover the origin of the laws themselves. But that seems to me like a separate question. And the way I want to explain this is by sort of borrowing and adapting, as I say, something C.S. Lewis said. Lewis talks about the relationship between Hamlet and Shakespeare a fair bit, or the character in a book and his author. I mean, I can ask, why did Sherlock Holmes move into Baker Street? And you can either say, well, it's because he was looking for a roommate or something like that, or you could say because Arthur Conan Doyle wanted him to. And both of those seem to be true in a different resolution of thought. Now, what I'm imagining here is us discovering Hamlet by Shakespeare on the table in front of us, and immediately, crudely, you look at it and say, well, that must have been designed. That must have an author. And I don't just do the William Paley thing. It's complex. What I say is, well, look, Professor Dawkins, I've done some research onto this little book, and I've discovered that it obeys certain laws. I've noticed that at the end of certain sentences, there are these little dots. And if there's a big dot, it usually means that it's the end of a sentence.
So this is a fascinating argument from Alex, if I'm understanding him correctly. It seems like he's kind of focusing on this idea that when you have a created work, you can see a connection between why something happens within the logic of the story and why something happens from the perspective of its creator. And it sounds like he's maybe saying that human history represents that, which I think it very well could be.
Sentence. And there are two different kinds of each letter. There's a big A and a little a. And if it's the beginning of a sentence, it's a new one. Also, we've discovered this thing called iambic pentameter. It seems that the way these sentences are constructed seems...
So, Shiv, you're making a huge logical mistake here. We're not talking about why is the universe big? Why were there 300 million years of dinosaurs? We're talking about whether God exists, which is a different matter. I'm going to see if I can try to explain this to you. Somebody might say, oh, you say that this person has an alibi for a murder because they went to the cinema, but that cinema was closed when they went there. That's just the analogy. Now, somebody could say, but the person might still have an alibi because maybe they forgot the cinema. They forgot what the cinema was. That doesn't therefore follow that they're saying that person forgetting which cinema they went to is the reason why the cinema is closed, if you get what I'm saying. There's a difference between saying just because X is true doesn't preclude Y because of reason Z, and therefore Z is the explanation for X.
To follow this law of literacy. And I said to you, now, where did this book come from? And you say, I still think there was an author of this book. I still think someone created it. And I said, yeah, but look at all the progress that we've made just by describing it in terms of these things that we're calling laws of literature. I've discovered all of these laws of literature, iambic pentameter, and sentence construction and grammar and all of this stuff. Surely one day these laws of literacy will go on to explain the origin of the laws of the literature.
Oh, I see. So he's making it a slightly more interesting point. Sorry, I hadn't quite understood what you were saying. So essentially he's saying, and I guess you can probably pick this up yourself, that it's silly to say that just because we observe laws of nature, that explains the natural universe. It's just as silly to say that as to say, because there are laws about the way to kind of properly construct a narrative, therefore that explains the origin of the narrative.
accuracy or the origin of the text itself. Surely that would be where this is going. Of course, I'm making a category error if I do that. And is there not a fear that we're doing that when we say that science will one day explain the origin of the very thing that science is about?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's a really great way of putting it. Like to say this idea that science could explain the origin of the thing science is about. Because again, science operates with laws, and all of those laws are kind of preconditioned on the natural world and the way that the temporal and material causes exist. So to say that science could possibly explain the origin, I mean, yeah, I can't put it better than O'Connor put it, that science could possibly explain the origin of the very thing it's about is absurd.
As I said before, from Darwin's success, because everything that you said about full stops and capital letters at the beginning of the sentence, and pentameters and things, you could have said that about life, and people did say it about life. And we notice that living things are remarkably well designed, that birds are beautifully designed to fly, and fish are beautifully designed to swim, and so on. And the complexity is all there. The detail of the design is.
By the way, I don't know if I want to know this, but I would be interested whether or not people have noticed improvement in the audio quality. It's fine. Oh, by the way, also while people are responding and stuff, do give the stream a like, please. That would very much help. And yeah, I'd appreciate it.
Incredibly impressive, and it would have seemed absolutely. I mean, I suspect this is why it took so long for Darwin to come on the scene, actually, because it just seemed so obvious that it had an author,
sure,
behind it. Darwin solved that. There isn't an author.
This is very curious. I actually feel like, wasn't there someone prior to Darwin who came up with the idea of natural selection? Because to me, I mean, natural selection is actually quite an obvious, intuitive idea, right? Like natural selection essentially just says, if you are more likely to die, then you will die. That's literally like, that is the natural selection is almost tautological. There's kind of no way around it. Like you can't really say, no, actually, I think if you're more likely to die, you'll survive. But yeah, that's essentially like literally the phrase survival of the fittest is basically a tautology. So I don't know. I do kind of wonder whether or not it's really accurate to say that the thing stopping people from coming up with Darwin's theories was that like the idea that the universe came from something other than direct creation was impossible for them to imagine.
Natural selection does the trick. So where is the analogy with Hamlet or Sherlock Holmes left?
I suppose the analogy.
By the way, it's also worth noting the main counter to Darwinian evolution at the time was a secular idea that called spontaneous generation, that said that animals emerge from basically, I want to say organic. I don't know if organic automatically implies life, but essentially emerges directly from chemical matter. And that was an idea that atheists were pushing, because of course it contradicts the Bible, which says that God created life, and like after that, like life doesn't then get created again. Whereas, and I will just confirm that I'm like right about this, but was spontaneous. Yeah, okay, yeah. So when Darwin was alive, there wasn't a unified universally accepted theory of the origin of life. A few key points. Spontaneous generation was still widely believed in the early 19th century. So this says that maggots like developed from rotting meat, for example. So people saw maggots in rotting meat, and they said, oh, clearly the maggots emerged from the meat. So the thing about that is not in keeping with theism, which says God created everything. So it's worth noting there were crack is that a word, or quack? I don't know. Nonsense atheist theories about the origin of the universe that Darwin had to, or the origin of life that Darwin had to dispel.
Would be that what Darwin did was close the question on the complexity of life.
By the way, it's also worth noting that just logically, a literalist reading of the Bible would necessitate a significant amount of speciation, because, of course, the Bible says that Noah brought animals onto the ark according to their kind. And, you know, the general reading of that would be that he brought the dogs on the ark, he brought cats on the ark, he brought bears on the ark, but then the development of those into all of the different types of dog, all the different types of cat, all the different types of bear was something that happened afterwards. Now, I'm not saying that this would have been obvious to people at the time, because maybe people weren't aware of the sheer number of species, but basically any contemporary person who tries to explain the ark as a literal historical account will claim that Noah brought on kinds, meaning similar animals that, or rather animals that would then produce a load of similar animals through speciation by natural selection.
But he didn't close the question on where life came from, as we've already agreed.
That's right.
And I suppose what I'm putting forward is that.
Well, look, I mean, one of the issues with taking a historical account of, like, taking Genesis as historical, and I was reminded of this today because I was just listening to a sermon, and there was kind of just casually mentioned that there was 100 years between Noah and the Tower of Babel. So that's not that long to get from literally just one family being alive to an entire civilization capable of constructing a giant tower. Like, that's like the rate of reproduction there is possibly like impossible.
That maybe laws of physics, laws of biology, laws of science are not the kind of thing that can explain the origin of the laws of physics, the origin of the laws of biology, that kind of stuff, where maybe it's sort of operating on.
I am quite surprised how far we got into this video without any reference to Christianity being evil.
Well, it could be. I mean, we haven't got there yet. But all I said was that Darwin's success should give us confidence, and that there will come a time when we understand the laws of physics. I think we're not far off. Not we. I mean, the physicists aren't far off now. In fact.
Richard Dawkins is about to tell us his views on Jordan Peterson. But first, if you want to hear that the mineral and try it for religion, for two reasons.
I honestly think we could justify skipping Jordan Peterson. Oh, goodness me. Okay, well, you know what? We're actually going to do a bloody...
This idea that religion, we don't really care about the question of whether it's true that Jesus was born of a virgin, whether he actually died on the cross. Maybe I'm just going to refuse to answer it.
Anyone who is listening to this back in double speed or not capable of hearing, not capable of listening to double speed in the way I am, I apologize, but I genuinely don't think I care about this. I do want to make some progress with the video, so just grin and bear it.
This is a cultural thing. It's a way of life. It's a motivation, reason behind your behaviors. I think this has got a lot to do with its popularization through people like Jordan Peterson. Ayaan Hirsi Ali seems to have been spending some time with Jordan Peterson and getting on with him, at least in this regard. I want to ask you about two reasons. First, I want to know, when you had a conversation with Jordan Peterson, which was around an hour and a half, where you talked about culture stuff, but he's very well known for talking about religion, and he comes at it from a completely different perspective. So I imagine the perspective that most of your previous Christian opponents, not Jordan Peterson, Christian, have come from. What do you make of his approach?
I also respect his courage in standing up to the Canadian laws about free speech.
I enormously respect his courage standing up to the Canadian laws about free speech. Sorry, I just wanted to show off the fact that I can still understand what's being said even at 3 times speed, but...
And value him for that reason. He talks about religion. I think it's bullshit. I think he doesn't make sense at all. I think he's impressing people by using language they don't understand, rather like Deepak Chopra, where people think, oh, it must be terrible, I can't understand it. Which is not something I can respect. Michael Shermer told me that he tried to pin down and said, do you actually believe that Jesus was born of a virgin? And Jordan Peterson said, 2 days to answer that. So Michael said, more or less, well, one sentence, one word, no. And that's how I feel about that. All the stuff about Jungian archetypes, and I'm not going to skip around that, but because of women, I mean, I think the most egregious example of that is where he looks at works of tribal art, where he shows things like 2 snakes around each other. So they must have some primitive, primeval knowledge of DNA, because they looked into their own cells in some sense and saw the DNA as double is a Jungian, and that is sheer bullshit. I don't think so. Do you think that you can have the conversation about religion? Is it the approach you're taking? Is there any room for progress here? I hesitate to say no to anybody, but I so far not been confident. I want to once again say how much I respect his courage in standing up to the word nonsense. Yes, so sandwich the bullshit between respect. Peterson's approach here seems to unlock new interest in particularly the Bible and equals the biblical corpus. My friend Chris Winton asked him on the podcast, he kept talking about biblical corpus. When you say biblical corpus, do you mean the Bible? Yes, I think he has inspired this new interest in biblical corpus. Because of that, because now when you see people debating religion, it tends less about what it is and more about the utility of religion, Jungian archetypes and stuff.
The God Delusion, which was the atheist book. Do you think it still survives as a sufficient treatment of God and religion in modern culture? If you write it again, would you be taking the same approach of talking about it as a scientific issue, or would you feel the need to change the way that you're talking about the subject
I would
altogether?
certainly still talk about it as a scientific issue, because I think that's the most important thing. I probably might add.
I will never, ever pre-watch videos. I enjoy the thrill of responding. So essentially what was just said there, if you weren't paying attention, was that, even if you were paying attention, was Richard Dawkins saying basically what a lot of people have said, which is, well, the whole Jordan Peterson thing where he kind of acts like whether or not Christianity is true doesn't matter, and it's all about the Jungian archetype and how we experience it psychologically and therapeutically, I guess. That's just a complete waste of time and not worth engaging with. That's basically all he said. And now we are, I think, approaching. I mean, if you look at the timestamp, the New Testament was. Let's see. Oh, goodness me. The New Testament is, quote, appalling. So,
Add a chapter on.
We have 20 minutes, so we'll see if we're, how much progress we're able to make in his taking down of the New Testament.
The idea of what Dan Dennett calls belief in belief, where the idea that whether you believe it or not, it's a good idea that some people do, and I think that's patronizing. I think that's condescending. It's sort of saying, well, we intellectuals don't need this crap.
This is kind of what Elon Musk said, I believe. He said that religion is useful because it encourages people to basically do more traditional family values, which helps perpetuate the population.
But other people may do, and if they do, then it's a good thing because it helps in the battle against Putin's. Well, not that Putin himself is religious.
I think Voltaire said, "I don't believe in God, but I hope that my maid does."
Well, that's very good. I didn't know that quote. It's a very good example, and that is so patronizing.
Yes, and indeed, it also, when you're debating the moral argument with people, when they say without God there could be no morality, and sometimes an atheist says, well, how dare you say that I can't be moral without God? And they say, I'm not saying you can't be moral without God, I'm just saying you can't ground your morality.
Yeah.
And yet, on the other hand, they say, but we need you to believe in God, otherwise society falls apart. Maybe you are actually saying that people can't be moral without God, more than just their ability to ground it, if you're saying that without this religious belief, society will fall apart.
Well, that is a good point. I would say, not that I really care about this. Again, I'm not one of the people who really pushes the idea that people need to be religious for political reasons, although I do become increasingly convinced it could help. But what I would say is, if that is an argument, I think it's less direct. Because that's the thing, if you say, as an atheist, you don't have a standard for your morality, then that is simply not you saying that person is not capable of being morally righteous. You're just saying that person doesn't have a standard of what morally righteous means. That does not have to be a criticism of that person directly and their own behavior, but it could be a criticism of a broader trend in society. And of course, I mean, this distinction between the systemic and the personal is well known in politics. It's very important as a distinction to make. So I think it's reasonable for someone to say that the consequences for the morality of society long term from atheism due to the systemic effects of it will be negative, even while an individual's morality as an atheist may not be affected negatively one way or the other. Hello, Jürgen Storm. That's a productive contribution. Christians believe religion is social engineering for Old Testament laws / commands, but don't accept that view for Christianity / New Testament. I'm not quite sure what you mean there with social engineering. I think I do understand what you're saying. So you're saying, in other words, that the Old Testament laws were given for a specific culture to facilitate them advancing in a certain way. So the difference there is that the Bible is very clear that God is talking about a literal nation in the Old Testament, the Israelites, the Hebrews, whatever. Whereas, of course, in the New Testament, it is equally clear that we're talking about a spiritual nation, a nation of priests. So there is no reason. And of course, there's also the fact there's simply way, way, way fewer New Testament laws that directly concern governance and stuff like that. So all of this is an indication that the New Testament isn't a series of laws to help society in a way that varies between, that varies with culture and historical context.
Wouldn't say that, but I recognize that some people may think that. I mean, I think that to ground your morality certainly in the Bible would be an appalling thing to do if you actually look at the Bible.
I must admit, I'm drawing a blank on who EM is. So Jordan Peterson and EM. Actually, I don't know who EM is.
Bible. Actually, look at any of the almost any of the moral lessons you can take from it. And some of the things Jesus
gives
said
me Elon Musk. Sorry, I'm so stupid. Elon Musk. Duh.
Very nice, but you have to pick and choose.
I got it.
Choose your way.
Sorry, no one, by the way, I believe said that gave me any feedback on whether the audio was markedly improved.
And setting aside.
And I also hope everyone has liked the video. I mean, let me check. Okay, so guys, wait, what? Oh, let me refresh this. I've got 0 likes. There's no way that's right. Let's see, what are we doing? How are you guys doing? Oh wait, good. Oh wait. So we're on 9 likes. Now there are 10 people watching right now. So somebody is a freeloader. You need to sort yourself out. There's nothing else to be said about it. All right.
Jesus's emphasis on loving your neighbor, which is very nice. The Sermon on the Mount is very nice. The fundamental doctrine of the Old Testament, of course, is appalling. But
putting the Old Testament aside,
in the New Testament, even the New Testament, the idea that we're born in sin is a hideous idea.
Why?
The idea that the only way to be saved from sin and the wages of sin is Jesus' death is a hideous idea, and I don't think it's one that Jesus himself ever put forward, is it? I think he probably would be rather shocked at that.
So he very clear, and this is embarrassing that Richard Dawkins is talks a lot about Christianity. I guess he doesn't know the Bible very well at all, because immediately you could just say, well, Jesus literally says that, his exact words, I mean, a ransom for many, right? Let me just get the exact. So I hope I'm not. Okay, so Matthew. Yep. This is it. So I knew it was pretty easy to find. We will just read it for fun. I mean, I don't know why. I literally could just read it off of ChatGPT, but something about that just feels like cheating. So it's Matthew 20:28, by the way. We'll just turn that at a leisurely pace. Just to confirm, of course, that Jesus was pretty explicit about the fact that he was going to die on the cross to save other people's, save people from their sins. Matthew 20:28. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. I don't know whether or not Richard Dawkins is going to elaborate on his belief that these ideas are appalling, but let me just say 2 things. Quite simply, 1, the idea that we are all sinners, there is nothing appalling about that. That is being honest. I would just say, if anything, it's just so appalling to me to imagine someone pushing this idea that we can't be honest about the fact that we've all sinned, that we've all done evil, wicked things in our life. Of course we have. Is someone genuinely going to say that they've never done anything bad, that they're just a perfectly morally good person? I mean, when you look at the kind of person that is, I don't want to get political, but obviously Donald Trump was asked, have you ever asked God for forgiveness for your sins? And Donald Trump said, well, I don't think I've ever done anything that I need to be forgiven for. And you wouldn't really say that Donald Trump is a particularly holy man. I imagine atheists are especially predisposed to dislike Donald Trump. So I don't imagine Richard Dawkins likes Donald Trump. So, but then at the same time, it's the criticism of Donald Trump, I think the most obviously could be made, is that he is arrogant. He's somebody who's very kind of cocksure. And clearly a big part of that is he's the kind of person who, when asked, hey, have you ever asked for forgiveness? He would say, I don't think I've ever done anything that needs to be forgiven. So to me, to say that this idea that we're all sinners is appalling, that is nonsense. And then as for saying this idea that Jesus Christ died for our sins, that's appalling. So for me, the idea that God loves you so much that he would rather die than be in heaven without you is actually quite a beautiful thought. Now, the only kind of contention would be, or the only like sticking point for some might be, well, why would someone need to die for my sins? And for me personally, this is where I don't think that the Bible, I'm like, I'll proudly admit this, I am very willing to sacrifice on the altar of theological logic, even though theological logic is a bit repetitive, the idea of omnipotence, this idea that God can literally do anything. I don't see any reason to think that is true. And as such, my position is that God literally cannot, he is not capable of abiding with sin. Like God just cannot. If you have sinned, if you have done something wrong in your life, God might love you so much, but he literally cannot be with you when you're in that state. And that's why he sent himself to live a perfect life and then suffer this incredible punishment so that he could bear the guilt for those sins. So, yeah, exactly. 100% arbitrary, Jesus died, literally a choice in the Christian narrative. No, it's not a choice. If God is not capable of abiding with sinful people, then it's completely reasonable to say that perhaps there is a mechanism whereby, and of course the Old Testament very much establishes this, somebody can take the punishment for someone else. Look, if you want to talk about hell, then you're not going to achieve anything, because I've already said, look, if you want to make me seem like I'm not a particularly credible apologist, get me talking about hell. But until Richard Dawkins mentions it, I'm not saying anything. Okay, so I literally said that I would sacrifice the idea of God's. I don't think God is omnipotent.
I imagine that Jesus would have to be aware of himself as the salvation. And if that's the case, he'll need to be aware of what he's saving people from, which can only be something like slavery to sin. Now,
I wonder whether you're reading something in there. I mean, salvation, he said things like...
So this is not going to be a very productive discussion. This is Richard Dawkins, who seemingly doesn't understand the Bible at all, and Alex O'Connor, who I think understands the Bible a lot better than Richard Dawkins, already starting to realize that the person he's talking to doesn't know that much about this issue. Which, again, like I said at the very start of this video or live stream, as we're now kind of approaching the end, and I apologize for any of the technical issues, or hopefully especially in the middle. Again, I don't think I still believe I have not got a explicit comment from someone, despite me having asked for it. So you guys really are doing well for yourself as far as calls for action, saying that the audio is now fine, which is, can I get that update on the audio, guys? But yeah, with that said, as I said at the beginning of the live stream, there was one moment, there was a clip I saw from this video where Richard Dawkins came across as especially unintelligent, and Alex O'Connor seemed to be awkwardly negotiating the fact that he was aware that he was unintelligent. I only got here and the audio is not fine. Thank you, Cami Moop. Is that Cami? Yeah, that is Cami. Great, glad to hear it. Fantastic. I can just listen to it myself. Let's see. How bad is it? Oh. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, goodness me. That is very disappointing. Yeah, audio is still choppy. I wonder why. It's curious that this hasn't happened before, so I'll have to I'll have to workshop. It's just nothing to be done for it. It's really not very good, is it? So we'll try and work something out.
If you have seen me, you've seen the Father. He said that kind of thing, but did he actually say that he was salvation?
Well, I suppose.
Yeah, he did. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except by me." It just this is such a stupid argument.
I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah, but
no one comes unto the Father except through me.
A guide for a good life, something like that. It doesn't mean that he surely never said that my death is necessary in order for you to be saved from sin.
Oh God,
quite possible.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I blasphemed, and I do actually apologize for that. But it's just I'm very upset by how much Dawkins does not understand the arguments.
Possibly. I mean, I think about the idea of the Eucharist and the Last Supper, and literally breaking up my body for you.
Matthew, just become Anglican, bro. To whom are you speaking? Me? To what end? What is why in particular should I become Anglican?
It does seem to be some indication that Jesus knew what he was doing if the Christians are correct about his mission on earth. A moment ago, you said it's an appalling idea that we're all born in sin. And I understand this intuition, but do you not think there's some wisdom in this idea or some sort of
this is
necessary...
like the kind of crazy thing about this is like that we're all born in sin is literally like it's like nobody's perfect, right? Like essentially it's kind of just a pretty milquetoast observation. Oh, that's okay, Matthew. I forgive you for your trolling. I'm in no mood for trolling because I am actually annoyed about my audio quality, especially since I was like, look, we're not cynical here. We obviously wouldn't care about anything as base as views or anything like that. But with that said, what were we saying? Yeah, I'm annoyed because obviously, like Alex O'Connor, Richard Dawkins, two big atheist guys. I was like, yeah, I'll do a response. Loads of people will be like, oh yeah, I want to see a Christian react to Alex O'Connor and Richard Dawkins. And I'm very upset to discover that they're going to click on this video and be like, oh, this guy's audio quality is very bad. This is a material impact on me. So that is unfortunate. I'm Anglican though, raised Catholic. I'm getting there. That is very good. Interesting, exciting little journey there.
Very humility in recognizing that we all do seem to fall short of the standards that we set for ourselves. That is, we're not going to make sense of a concept like sin because we don't believe in God.
I was thinking I should have like prayed for the live stream beforehand a bit more than I did, which is to say not at all.
Sin doesn't make sense. But even just in terms of our own moral standards, whatever standards we set for ourselves, we seem to fall short of these every single day. And is it not just that idea that's being captured when somebody says, look, even by your own standards, you're falling short of where you should be? I mean, maybe that's what...
Even a newborn baby?
We should take okay, so the thing is, that's not what Christians actually believe. So babies aren't sinners. Babies haven't committed any sin. Babies are born with a sinful nature, meaning that they have a human nature, and human nature is to sin. Again, that is a completely milquetoast idea that ultimately any baby, if they grow up, will sin. But yeah, obviously babies themselves don't sin.
I would probably respond by saying that not all Christians will say that a newborn baby is born in sin in the sense that they're responsible for it. More like born with a propensity towards sinning, which I imagine you would even agree with, that newborn babies, although they haven't, committed immoral acts yet, they're born with this sort of human nature which has a predisposition towards doing things that fall short of our moral standards. Maybe.
I'm sorry for you having to do a degree in this kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go. You got the kind of like Alex O'Connor makes a very obvious point in response to this guy where he's like, hey, you say that this idea is terrible, but this idea is literally just, and again, like I already said, this idea is just like a basic thing that pretty much anyone would agree with. Like this idea that he thinks is appalling is an idea that any sane person would agree with, that all human beings have a tendency towards sin. Obviously, somebody who is like mentally basically, you know, mentally disabled or a child, and therefore not really having moral agency because they can't think through their decisions, it's literally impossible for such a person to sin because they can't think through their decisions. But obviously, if they were able to, then they would still do bad things, just as every single person who is capable of thinking through their decisions will occasionally choose to do bad things. This is all very basic. So, by the way, Shu, I just disagree with your position that collective morality is immoral. I think it's actually this wonderful, beautiful thing that we have to recognize. We are forced to recognize that our evil actions don't just affect ourselves. So, no, babies aren't free from sin. Babies can be negatively affected by other people's sin, and that is, I think, a wonderful pushback against a individualism in our society that is very harmful. Anyway, everyone, I will now depart. I will love you and leave you, as they say. And that is, of course, because I don't want to draw this out any longer than I have because of the unfortunate audio quality issues. Now, I will just try to work something out about that. But yeah, I will see you all this coming Monday. So, okay. Shu Vertica, I felt like you went, oh, look, bye-bye, as if like I've suddenly decided to leave based on, as if I don't always finish up my live streams about, you know, just gone 10. But yeah, all right, everyone, I'll see you all later. Hopefully I can sort out whatever this is. I don't see how it can possibly be an internet issue. It could just be a bloody slow computer issue. And that would make sense because I am like putting my finger to my computer and it is red hot. Like it is burning up, which would suggest I have considered getting a laptop cooling thing. But yeah, basically there is clearly love the stream. Make sure you like the stream. Everyone else, make sure you like the stream before you leave. Yeah, I do worry it's literally just a computer power thing. So, all right, bye everyone. I will see you all this coming Monday. Ta-ra! End stream.